Today we're going to look at the Z Fold 7 and the Moto Razr Fold, and we're going to look at them closely with the cameras. We're going to go into detail on them. We're going to look at daytime and nighttime shots. We're going to zoom in and really pixel peep. Let's get to it. So as you can see here, we got the Motorola Razr here on the left and the Galaxy Z Fold 7 on the right. And we are going to do a deep dive in pixel peep. If this is not your kind of cup of tea, go ahead and check out the previous video where we compare everything else. So let's go ahead and look at these. Right here is the main shooter. Now on the Z Fold, of course, we have a 200 megapixel main shooter that is taking this photo, but it's bending it down to 12 megapixels. And on the Motorola here, we have a 50 megapixel main shooter, and it's also bending it down to 12 megapixels. But the difference is in the sensor size. Well, let's see how the 200 does if we tap in a little bit. So we'll do a couple clicks in here, and we'll just look at, say, the signs here on the side. Let's do the same here. We'll click in. I try to take these shots as close together as I can, but due to traffic and everything, sometimes it gets difficult and it just doesn't happen. But zooming in, they look pretty close. You can see that car was moved. And let's go down here and let's look at that sign down there. That's going to be our main viewpoint, is this Jayville Tavern. So you can see right there, the Brits, it's starting to get a little blurry here. On this one, probably the same thing. And it looks like the Samsung is a little more well lit. So looking at the two of them, you get a little bit more clarity here on the Samsung. Again, this is a 200 megapixel zoom lens, or no, a 200 megapixel lens that we are cropping in on. So compared to a 50, that would explain why this is a little bit brighter, but I don't know if the clarity is there. We'll have to lean on the other photos for that. But at this point, it does look a little bit clearer. But who's going to be cropping in on these main photos? Why don't we just zoom in like we did on this next photo here? So this is zooming in 3 times on both of them. And as you can see, they both look very compatible. And let's go ahead and crop in on these. You know, the difference between cropping and zooming. Cropping is after the fact. Zooming is before the fact with the camera. It looks to me like now things have changed. It's a little brighter on the Motorola, and I think that gives it a little more clarity. You can tell that by the Brit signs. Of course, they are waving in the wind a little bit, but let's look at this tattoo sign and go in a couple more clicks just to verify. You can see it's really starting to blur here. I think I just want one more click, and you can see here it's quite a bit clearer here on the Motorola. So processing and sensor size makes it a little bit better here on the Motorola. And then if we want to zoom in a little more, this is the 6 times. This is a main setting on the Motorola, and it looks really good. They actually look pretty good. The Samsung also is 5 times, but here's where things differ on the Samsung. Now it's switching to a 10 megapixel zoom lens, okay? And their zoom lens, 10 megapixels, is not so great, but it looks like it's doing pretty good here. But let's go ahead and pixel peep with a couple clicks here. Click in 3 times and do the same thing here. 1, 2, 3. And let's move this over. And what do we've got? They're pretty close, actually. Samsung's holding its own. If we're reading the signage in the window, it might be a little clearer, and this is just a tad bit clearer, but I think Samsung did pretty good on this 6 times zoom here. And we'll go here to 10 times on both of them. And what do we've got? Samsung is still holding its own pretty good. I think that you can see here, the coloring's a little different, and these Brit signs are starting to blur a little bit, and this Boomtown is not as clear, nor the tattoos. I mean, if we just go a couple clicks in, I think it'll tell us the story here on which one is clear. You can definitely see and make out the antiques very clear on the Motorola. And then we go in one more. This is 20 times on both of them. And at 20 times, you can definitely see the big difference here between the two. There's no sense in cropping in anymore. It's pretty obvious. And this is what you get when you're dealing with a 50 megapixel versus a 10 megapixel zoom. Samsung needs to step it up, but I don't think they're going to do that with the next 8. Now I went ahead and did one more. I did 30 times on both of these just to give you a comparison, and there is no comparison. You know, you've got much clearer picture. Now there is some AI sprucing it up here, but I think it did a perfect representation of what we've got going on here. So this is much clearer on the Motorola. Now we're going to go to the other side of the road here and look at the other side where there's more shade because the sun is actually more directly going against the building, believe it or not. And you've got a lot of awnings here on this side. So here we go again with the 200 megapixel lens. And we'll look at those signs there and look at the shadowing and do the same thing over here. Now doing the same thing over here, you can see that the Samsung is a bit clearer, not a lot. It's just a slight bit clearer. But again, those lenses weren't really meant for zooming. So let's go ahead and go 3 times, or no, yeah, 3 times on both of them, I believe is what this is. And as you can see, you start to see a little more dynamic range here on the Motorola, I believe, where the Samsung still stays a little bit grayer, although, you know, they both seem to be blowing out a little bit here, maybe even more here on the Motorola. Let's go ahead and do a couple of clicks in and see what we got going on here. And what was it? 1, 2, 3. Now here we are zoomed in on both. It almost looks like the Samsung's a little more well lit here, and you can see here in the shadows just a little bit better. I think there is still a little more clarity on the Motorola simply because it's using a 50 megapixel. I don't know if this is cropped in with the 200 megapixel or it used the 10 megapixel lens. The Samsung supposedly real quickly tries to decide which is better, the cropping in on the 200 or using the 10 megapixel lens, but it's really hard to tell which one that you're looking at. I'm sure some of you out there might know how to look at the specs of the photo and figure which one it is. I haven't taken the time to do that yet. These are really neck and neck, I think, right here. And they both look really good at the 3 times. Okay, here we are now on the 6th time on both of them. And it does look like the Motorola is blowing out the sky here where the Samsung is leaving it clear. So that's pretty good. And I believe the Samsung at this point is using the 10 megapixel lens. Now I do want to crop in just a couple, just to look at the two of them and see what happens here when we do. You can definitely see that now I want to do crop in a couple clicks just to look at them here and see, looking at these flags here. Let's go ahead and do a couple clicks here and see what happens. Yeah, it's definitely much clearer on the Motorola. So that does tell me that this is a 10 megapixel on the Samsung and the 50 megapixel on the Motorola. And then going into 20 one more time is just kind of a waste of space on your device with the Samsung. As you can see, it's just really blurry, which you still have something usable here on the Motorola. Now we do have to talk about the Samsung feature where you can turn on 50 megapixels and 200 megapixels for your shot. The 200 just isn't worth it because it's just that one still shot. You can't zoom in. But on the 50 megapixel, you can zoom in, I believe, up to 5 times. So that does make a little bit of a difference. So check this out. So here, if we zoom in on the Samsung, I'm gonna go a couple clicks here. And then you can see here, looking down the street, everything looks nice and clear. The signs are clear. Then over here on the Motorola, go ahead and click in. And you can see here that it still looks fairly clear. And we go in a couple more clicks here, and then you can see the difference here. Now, if you zoom in on that same photo just a little bit, or crop in, that is, on the photo, you can see here that the Samsung is quite a bit clearer here because it's using that 50 megapixel setting. It's not pinning down to 12 anymore. Or over here on the Motorola, it is still moving down to 12. Now on the Motorola, you can do a similar thing. When you go to high resolution, you capture it at that 50 megapixel level. And you can see here, when you crop in on that, you can see I'm using the next picture here. It's a little bit clearer than the Samsung. You see it's starting to pixelate. If we click in one more, you can see it even more. And you can see it down here quite a bit. Click in one more here, and you can see it's still quite a bit clearer. So what are we learning here? Well, we're learning that the 200 megapixel lens, for me, it just seems like a gimmick. It doesn't do all that great. I mean, when you look at these two photos again, look at the parking sign. It's blurred on the Samsung, and this is using its 200 megapixel camera bending down to 50 megapixels. You know, it doesn't quite match that of a 50 megapixel camera saving at 50 megapixels and cropping in. So don't fall for that 200 megapixel lens gimmick or sales and marketing pitch. Now this is both phones using the night mode, of course, Samsung over here and the Motorola here. And if we crop in, of course, we know we're using that 200 megapixel zoom again. It's doing okay. And if we crop in here, you know, we're doing okay. But again, this is not made for cropping when you're using their standard lens. But I do say on night, it looks to me like the Motorola is a little better. I don't know, there might be some more clarity here. Yeah, it's a tough decision here. Maybe the Samsung is a little bit clearer. Let's go on to the next photo where we do actually do a real crop and see what hand or zoom that is. And as you can see, when you zoom in, there's a little bit of difference here. Samsung's looking pretty good, but the sign's looking interesting, I guess is the word for it. So let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit and see what's happening. So now here's cropping in at night, and that was a three times zoom. So I'm believing that they're using the 20 or the 200 megapixel lens here on the Samsung versus a 50 over here on the Motorola. I think the Samsung actually is doing really well here, and it didn't blow out anything. So I think their clarity on their 200 megapixel camera at night is really working here in this instance. So here we are with a 6 times on both of them, and they both look really good. I believe the Motorola does look a little clearer to me, and you can see that when you look at all the different signage. If we crop in a little bit, just a couple clicks, I think we can see where the Samsung starts to really pixelate, but it's not doing too bad. If you look at the tattooing sign, you can see that it is a little bit clearer there on the Motorola. And then we go to 10 times on both of them, and then it's pretty clear. Although, because it does allow more light in, it looks like the Motorola is blowing out the signs just a little bit more than what Samsung is. But that building is much more clear, and I think it's a much more pleasing overall photo from the Motorola. Now going the other direction where there's a little more light on the street, you can see here, they're both doing it pretty well. And if we go a couple clicks in, we can see a little more detail. They both seem to be doing about the same, although to me, my eyes, Motorola does look a tad bit clearer. Now when we go into zoom, let's see what happens. This is the 3 times zoom on them both, and I don't think either one of them are handling it very well. Let's go ahead and crop in just a little bit. So I don't think either one of them is doing all that well at night. And then we go down to 10 times on both of them. And of course, the Samsung just falls all apart because it's using a 10 megapixel lens. And you have a usable, I think, photo here with the Motorola because things do look clear, just don't crop in. So there you go. There's some night shots. And, you know, overall, they're pretty competitive, but I think the Motorola does take it just a little bit, especially when having that 50 megapixel lens across the board. Samsung needs to do better with their next rendition. Okay, now it's time for us to look at the videos. We're going to look at the daytime and then we're going to look at the nighttime between the two of them. So let's go. So walking down the street, as you can see here, they both look pretty good. I think there's more dynamic range in the Motorola, as you can see the clouds and everything, but the Samsung is a little brighter. I don't know if that is giving us a little more detail in doing that. You're going to have to tell me what you think after viewing this. But they both are doing really, really well. And as far as the color representation, it's pretty accurate, I believe, on both of them. It's a little more gloomy out. So when we zoom in here, you can see we've got a 50 megapixel versus probably a 10 when we're doing this. You know, it's really hard to say, but looking at this cloudy day, you know, they're both actually doing really well, and they would probably do much better at night. I feel like the Samsung has a little bit cleaner zooming though, or at least it did zooming out. Everything is a little smoother, it was a little more choppy on the Motorola. So between the two of them, you know, it's really hard to call a better video. You know, I think you can be happy with either one, but if you start to zoom in it, okay, well, then you do need to look more towards the Motorola because it doesn't have an issue switching cameras like Samsung does. Now, nighttime, it's, you know, a play on who's going to wobble quite a bit. And it looks like the Samsung is actually having a little bit of that uh, bubbling more than the Motorola. Motorola seems to be pretty steady here. They're both doing really good, but I think the Motorola, you know, you can see it's not blowing out the lies, and you can see the Samsung is waving a bit. It's struggling. Not that the Motorola isn't. The Motorola is having a little bit of that flickering, but nowhere near as much as Samsung, as you can see here. And if I zoom in a little bit, you can see Samsung again. Switching those lenses, it just struggles and just cannot keep up with the Motorola. Now, with this battle between these two phones, I think it's pretty overwhelming that the Motorola, in most cases, is superior. And Samsung just needs to step up their game. I mean, the same cameras for what, the last 6 years, they need to do something better. Processing isn't working. The AI is not really helping them out at all. So they need to step up their lenses. Now, between the two of them on selfies, I think they look really good. This is not the non-portrait. I'll put the megapixels here on the screen for you because I've forgotten what they are at the moment. But they're pretty compatible. I don't know what to say between them other than I didn't mirror the one on the Motorola. I forgot to set that up first. And then go to the zoom. They both can zoom in a little bit closer. You know, it's about the same. And then we go to portrait version here where it does a blurring. What's the difference here? You know, can you see any difference? You know, you can adjust the amount of blur on both of them. So I think they're both doing really well on this. And then we go here to a little bit wider shot. And when you go to wider shot, I think the Samsung is a cleaner representation of coloring, and something happened here on the Motorola that I really just don't like. Things kind of blurred out, but the coloring, is it better on the other side? Yeah, see, it's better there than it is here on the wide. Wide, it suddenly got darker and is not as good as Samsung. Samsung stayed consistent between the two. And then moving to the night shot, I think they're both doing good. And again, you can adjust the amount of bokeh here in the back. And let's do the zoomed in shot here and see which one. You know, I think they're both doing well. Really a hard call. Now that was my battle between the Samsung and the Motorola, and I'm sure I left some things out. And if there's some things that you'd like to see, go ahead and leave them down in the comment, and maybe we can reshoot some things as well. Other than that, tell me what you think. Which phone won the battle, the Samsung or the Motorola? Now, if you want to see more content like this, don't forget to subscribe. And of course, if you missed the first version where I battled these things with everything else, check out this video here. Until next time, have a wonderful day and God bless.